business. It's business time. Hang tight, we're gonna get into the business right here in a couple minutes. Baby, baby. It's business. It's business time. All right, well, we are here with Mr. Ed Dwornik at the week 4 installment of It's Business Time. We want to thank Stitch House for having us. Ed and I are drinking our local products here. I got myself the Juicy Fruit Sour. He's got the Road Soda.
I got a bigger glass.
One of the advantages of doing this at a brewery, but again, we want to thank Stitch House for having us. It's a great location to do an event like this. And yeah, we are sitting down with local small business and music legend, the folk hero, Mr. Ed Dwornik. Thanks again for joining.
Hey, it's nice to be here.
He just asked if I'm going to ask him questions. And I don't know, are you going to ask me if I'm going to ask you questions? No, we're getting too meta. But no, for real. Ed, I've known you for a long time. The owner of Aztec, the co-owner of Aztec Printing. You guys have been in business 25 years. Flyers I've gotten from you guys for what, probably 10, 15 years. This one was printed right at Aztec. But really, you're one of the most interesting small business stories in the area because not a lot of people would have said, hey, a small business print shop that started 98 would be able to compete with the big guys, the Staples, the FedExes, all that type of stuff. And I've heard so many stories about your journey myself, talking late at night after shows, talking during the day when I have business questions, all that. He has, in a lot of ways, been a mentor for me through the years when it comes to business. But this series is not about how cool we are. This series is about the people who are watching and what it's like to grow a business in this area, the Delaware area, the trials, the tribulations, the highs, the lows. Okay. Do you mind telling me a little bit about how it all started?
Well, really, a lot of how it started is Jeffrey Durham, my partner, and I were both working for larger companies, and really we're running into the problem of middle managers and heavily structured businesses we were working for made it really, really hard to get work done for clients. And Jeff and I had met when we were 18 years old. We printed T-shirts at a place called Eastern Rainbow Factory, and he ended up moving into the copy business when it was a high-end business. When Kinko's was a great company 35 years ago, he was one of their top managers. He ran a store in Cherry Hill that did $3.5 million a year out of a single location. And he was really a powerhouse in the digital printing business before there was a digital printing business. I kind of went a different route. I was printing shirts, and I had a kid coming along. I said I had to make a couple more dollars. I couldn't be printing T-shirts anymore, so I got into offset printing sales, where I was working around big printing presses, selling print jobs, and I pretty quickly realized that if you can control the design of the job, if you would say, hey, I can get this thing designed for you also, you could design the job to fit the presses that you were running. And then wasn't long after that I figured out the jobs were either being shipped or they were going in the mail, so I took over the mailing side of a lot of my projects. So I could turn a $1,200 or $1,400 printing job into a $2,800, $3,000 project management.
What year was this that
So
happened?
that was really, I was starting. So I started it in 1977, silk screening, and by 83 or 84, I was in the offset business. And what started to happen was a pretty massive contraction and an upheaval in the printing business, and it was brought on. Some of the disruptive forces were the introduction of digital typesetting. There was no longer, when I started, you were using photo methods to get something onto a plate. And the technologies came hard and they came fast. So if you invested in one generation of computers, 2 years later it was going to be obsolete. So a lot of smaller shops and larger shops alike got kind of caught out, holding 5-year leases on machines that were only, particularly Mac systems and all, that were only relevant for 2 years. So there's a big shakedown that occurred that way because of the speed of the advances in technology. The other thing that happened is, particularly with Kinko's, where Jeffrey used to work, it was copy shop. It was a pretty line level place. Like people come in with a box of stuff, and you'd put it on the machine or feed it into a feeder, and it would give you copies of the stuff. But when you started getting into digital files, it became a lot more complex, and you really couldn't use line level minimum wage or lower wage people. You had to have people that knew how to think on their feet, how to build digital files, how to solve problems. And particularly in the early days of digital printing, there were a lot of problems. The machines weren't as powerful. The softwares didn't work as well, so it was a lot trickier. So digital workflow, pretty soon it was pretty obvious that a lot of the larger concerns couldn't really scale up in a digital workflow. So
can I ask you a question? So there's a lot of landmarks, right, as a company grows. So 98 is when you and Jeff struck out on your own, correct?
Yeah, we started our company then.
So one of the landmarks is, and you had just kind of touched on this, a nice segue there, is when you kind of realized that you can't just hire, you know, people for minimum wage or for low wages who don't have a lot of experience. You had to start. What was your first employee? What was that like when you guys said to yourself, we need help here and we need someone who knows what they're doing?
When you talk about like our current core team, like printing, there's really three components to the job. There's getting the files together and ready to run, and we had people that we knew from the rest of the industry that were willing to come to work with us because they were dealing with places that were there's a lot of over management in business in general. So they were being driven crazy. They were trying to get their work done too. So like we were all kind of refugees from these workflows that were kind of overwrought and overthought. Jeffrey always called it paralysis through analysis. It's like, can't we just get the work done now, you know? And so some of our core team came to work with us right away. Mark Haley, that's my general manager now, worked with me at Kodak.
I see Mark about every other week.
Yeah, and Jen McVeigh is our lead designer. She worked with Jeffrey over at Kinko's, and they didn't come to work with us in the first few months, but after we got established, and they were willing to take a risk on the younger company, and they came to work with us. It's interesting with our business as we grew it, we could have skilled people come in. They had direct contact with the clients, and it's not like some businesses where if it's a low cost to entry, like you have a window washing business and you let somebody work with their own set of clients, they can just go and work with the clients and wash windows. But we have our business, we're able to kind of keep our core team intact because you have a lot of capital equipment in our business.
Yeah.
We have, maybe $1.8 million in digital presses. They have a half-life of about 4 or 5 years, so you need to run a lot of work on them and get them paid for because they're going to be obsolete soon, and we wear them out.
Yeah.
Like we run millions and millions of copies on them, and then they go into the heap. So that's kind of where our core team wanted to come to work with us because they wanted to get work done.
Yeah, that's a great segue, too. When it comes to competition, a lot of businesses will use someone, train them up, and then as soon as they're trained, now they have a competitor out there. They can go out. And, I mean, I'm sure you remember the time when software was expensive, all these machines were expensive. Now we're in a world where someone can get on YouTube, buy Adobe products, and within, 2-3 weeks, be right there in the design field.
Yeah, the design's right. Like, you can do that. Part of our power, though, is the engine of production, I call it. And that's the idea that, yes, they can design something and get it done, but, when those jobs are done and they're finished, they're produced in our shop. And they're out the door. So we'll have people call around, or they'll call, say, we got this job, and they'll call somebody else for a price. We'll deliver the job before they get the price from the other place. I mean, we're very, very fast. And the immediacy of it's really important. So when you talk about the model of how we do business, there's a very low level of organization in it beyond what actually needs to be done. Like we don't have a computer job control system. We early on selected the amount of, you can do accounting as a granular thing. You can do it down to the sheet of paper, or like once a year you can tell the IRS how much paper you have on the floor. About, you know. So you can get as detailed as you need to. Invoices are the same way. If you give somebody an invoice and you line item everything on the invoice, they start going, well, what's this and what's that? And I always told them, I said, no, put more than 3 things on there, you know, like it's like, oh, here's you know, the cost of the job. If you can just do that, that's much better. It's simpler for people to understand, and it gives people less of a chance to nitpick you. The other thing is like we try to work with customers that are a certain profile. We work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies when we started, and increasingly we found that they were, it was like trying to deal with, you know, I don't know, a disturbed person, because they weren't really oriented towards getting the work done. They were just trying to control every aspect of what you were doing. They're trying to beat every nickel they could out of us, and they were trying to stretch the payments out, you know, 90 or 100 days. And we finally, you know, we work with people that are just trying to get work done, appreciate what we do, and are willing to pay for it, you know, when we do it. And so the, you know, Bank of America's and some of the larger companies we had dealt with historically, we just stopped working with them. There was no money in it.
Yeah, so I was going to say, it's interesting. I mean, you are truly a stageman for sure. You know, you make this easy. You got all the knowledge, and I love that. What's interesting, you mentioned like the picking of the customers. That's always a big one. Again, think of this series as for those who are starting business, and they're like, where do I get resources? Where do I learn without having to make the mistakes in the first place?
Well, I don't know how
and Delaware, right? You know very well. You got to make the mistakes on your own.
Your toes,
and the Delaware market is a very unique market. It's small, which is good and bad. But one of the things, David Hayter of last week, who's here tonight as well, that was one of the big questions for him as a photographer. And he gave a little bit of a similar answer, which is, you know, as you grow as a business, you want to avoid the clients that just kind of, what'd you say, disturbed, that seem disturbed, and run your folks around.
Well,
can you talk a little bit more about like client acquisition?
So when they come in, like our people are given a lot of responsibility for pricing their own projects, and they have leeway. So if they talk to somebody, and their, you know, spider sense tells them this is going to be a person that's difficult to work with, you're not always right, but a lot of times you are. And so what we do is a lot of it's rhetoric, you know. So it's like, well, how do you talk to that person? You're not going to tell them, well, you're going to be a pain in the ass, so it's going to be this much more. Right. What you say is, like, you seem to have some very discerning tastes, and it's going to take us a while to reach what you're really looking for. You're not quite sure what you want, so we got a little process ahead of us. And then the other thing we'll do with that, like, you'll give them a range of price. So, like, if Aaron came to me and he's got, here's the copy, here's the photo I need, put this together into a design, he knows what he wants. It's going to be a pretty quick job. You know, we have a history with them, but even beyond that, you can tell when somebody's organized and is going to hand you everything you need to do the job. Then you know that might be a $600 job. But if somebody comes in, they're going, I'm not quite sure, and here's some photos. I'm having trouble getting these photos. I'm not sure the resolution of it. I've looked at the copy. I'm pretty sure it's okay. You're hearing all this ambivalence. Then you might say that you give them a range. You go like, this might cost between $1,100 and $1,800 to design this. And if you're really worried about the individual or wondering whether they're serious or not, and you go, and how would you like to pay your deposit? You know, because and a lot of times we're pleasantly surprised. Someone says, oh, here's my credit card, and and then the next day they come back and they've gotten their mind clear, and they're handing you all the stuff, and the job goes done. You got a great client.
In sales, we call that assume the sale. Just kind of like, this is, how would you like to pay for all this? Let's get this rolling, because
And then the other thing I'd say is, in Delaware, it's a very, very small market. So you're going to know people, you're going to meet people, and you're going to know people. And if you have a good relationship, even with your colleagues, people that are competitive or in a lateral business, like if you're doing motion photography, video, and you got a friend that's doing mostly still photography, a lot of times you'll know you can pop an idea for a reference on that. And then asking a little bit of a narrative from the client, just to get a little backstory to see if it matches up with any kind of credible idea that they might be a serious person that's going to pay you. And so we always told our people to err on the side of doing business. So I always thought of like, a dog in a dumpster. The dog will eat anything in the dumpster, and if it's not right, then he'll regurgitate it and move on. And like that's kind of when you're starting your business, you have to be a little bit like that dog. You got to go in and go like, well, I don't have a lot to do this week, so maybe I'll take a chance on that person, knowing that there's a certain element of risk in it. But you're trying to get your book built up. You're trying to move along a little bit. As you get busier, it's a lot nicer because you're not only are you have a little bit of financial breathing room, but you also have less time to fool around. So you'll begin to value your time as your time needs to be valued. So that's another thing I'll say too, like business plans are, you got to have a business plan or a narrative, a story in your head, That's great. But what I've found and what's really helped us along over the years is more of a situational awareness. Like what's actually going on around us that's pretty important too. So you can choke on your business plan, but if you really kind of watch what's going on around you and sort of just try to be aware, get outside your head a little bit, you'll have expectations. Sometimes you'll trick yourself a little bit sometimes with some clients because you'll want them so bad that you'll convince yourself that they'll be great to work with, even though, you know, the other voices in your head are saying, whoa, you know,
yeah,
this
the
might
red
not
flags
be great,
are
or,
coming
you know,
in.
I'm so busy this week, maybe I don't need this. So if you try to keep yourself a little bit centered and try to see what's really going around you. The other thing is like with your market, so you don't really know what you're going to be doing in 5 years. None of us do. So if you try to watch what's going on, not obsessively, you know, you have to look out. It's like it's less like driving a train where you're looking out the front of the train. It's more like navigating a boat where you have to have a little bit of a 360-degree view. You got to be able to see what sort of trends are. You're going to ask your clients. When we started our business, the one thing that was different than us, with us than a lot of other printers is we wouldn't go in there and tell them what equipment we had and what we did. Like we didn't want to do that. Like we wanted to go to somebody, have enough flexibility, enough colleagues in the business where if I have a big print job, we get it printed. We can get it printed at a trade rate and it's still competitive. So if somebody needs like, you know, 60,000 or something, we're probably not going to print that in-house. But we have places that'll do it at a low enough price to us that we can still sell it to our customer competitively. So the point is, we don't go to our customers and tell them what we do that much as to say, what do you need done, you know? And then the other thing is, you know, when I work with these old school guys for, you know, half my career, they'd always say, well, you can have turnaround time, or you can have quality, or you can have price, pick two. And I was like, why can't they pick three, you know? Why wouldn't I want to be the most competitive printer in my market? And why shouldn't they be able to get the stuff when they want it? And it all has to look great, or they just won't accept it. So
that's a great segue to one of my personal favorite questions, right? Because I think part of the things I want to do with this series is help people avoid some of the low moments in business, some of the moments that stress them out. When we had Spaceboy, I learned that David had to sell his house at one point. He had a bad loan and his business needed money, and that was a moment. I can only imagine in printing between 98 and 2020 that there was a moment where you said to yourself, what am I doing competing with the Staples? What am I doing competing with all these other people out here? Was there like a low point, and how did y'all get through that?
The problems we had didn't have to do with competition from Staples and Kinko's. Kinko's, because Jeffrey, my partner, had been a top Kinko's manager, the middle managers in Kinko's targeted us, and they built a store across the street from us, and we had people going, oh, they're gonna, I was like, I look at everybody, I go, I'm not worried about it, because what would happen is they had line level people in there. It wasn't a line level business anymore. So what would happen is their employees, if they looked at something, they looked at the job and went like, oh, you know, I'm not dealing with this. They'd send them across the street.
This is on 202, right?
Yeah, on 202. It's a great source of referrals for us. We never worried too much about it. We felt like we did a great job long enough and hard enough that the work would all fall our way. And at this point, the last 2 or 3 years, all of the work has fallen our way. We are commonly referred to as the printer at this point. Now, there's larger shops that do different things. There's people that do a national profile, you know, or a regional profile. But in terms of this town, when people are serious about getting something done, a mailing, any kind of brochure work, any kind of educational materials, they end up with us because we are the lowest cost, the fastest, and we're easy to deal with, and the quality's.
I love that. Great segue. I do want to take a real quick moment. First of all, Aztec Printing. I'm gonna put a little graphic here, right, in the editing room. Check them out. Their location on 202. Great segue. Yeah, there's going to be a graphic here, too. Yeah, it's all going to fill in. It's going to say Ed Dwornik right here. No, don't worry about that. I'll handle that later. But why don't you take a real quick moment, because everything's evolved through the years. I know, like, printing, design services is a real quick moment. Just let everybody know what you do, where they can find you. And then if you have any events, and it can be music, anything coming up.
Well, the thing is, like, so we're located on Silverside Rd. Aztec DE, AztecDelaware.com. That's how you reach us. Most people that work with us drop a file onto our website. What makes us different from, you know, a strictly online printer is you drop the file down, then you can call in. Go, hey, I dropped that file. How's it look? What's the cost? Any questions? Can you get it to me? So we decided, you know, we are an internet-based printer, and we are a place where you can call. You can also come in and have things looked over. So we don't tell someone, you know, people are really having a hard time now, including myself, where you're going to a business, like you're trying to pay a bill even, and you can't get a person on the phone. So we decided when we got into business that we weren't going to have a phone system or a phone tree of any kind. So when you call us, the phone rings and someone picks it up. It's like, wow, because when we started, I said...
It's true. I've worked with them a bunch.
I had a room full of people. I'm like, do any of you like dealing with these phone trees? And they're like, no. So we're not making the customer do our work. Like, we pick the phone up, figure it out.
Yep.
You know,
I'll tell a quick story. And I do a lot of flyers, printing, a lot of design stuff. And more than once, I have called Aztec. I send them a file. I give them a call. How's everything look? Mark is normally the one I talk to.
Yeah.
Looks great. How many times I cannot count, right? When I'm in a different area and I need something done at another print store, and I won't knock any of the big guys, but I'll just say it is worlds of difference between having like a person answer, look at your file and confirm what you're about to spend hundreds of dollars on, versus having, you know, a teenager who's running the cash register answer the call and be like, I don't know, I don't run that department. Okay, well, can you send me over to that department? Department answer, I don't know, we haven't looked at the file. You know, it's just a completely different experience. So,
well, no one wants to do anything because they're not really being paid that much, and they know that it's hard because their job is terrible. You know, like I wouldn't want to, you know.
Right.
So we're kind of refugees from that stuff. A lot of the people that work for me worked in those kind of environments and just wanted to get work done. That's part of it. The other thing I'll talk about, like if you're building a business, you know, we've hit the wall a couple times, and I won't go into that. Sometime, you know, probably
next series. I'll have you back in December.
Yeah, it'll be like a 10. That's like a 10-part thing. But we got through some of the difficulties we had because I did have a partner, and so like when we ran into really crazy stuff, like I'm pretty good at problem solving. I've done relief work in disaster areas. I'm just really good at walking into an area and going like, oh boy, you know, what do we have
Did you
here?
see my promo for you? I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. Did you see that?
No, I didn't, but that's funny. But the thing being that I would go, like, when we had real big problems to deal with, you know, I would tell, well, Jeffrey, you run the day-to-day operations. And that's that engine of production. So he would keep the day-to-day shop running, work flowing through, stuff going out the door, money flowing through, and that's, like, huge. And I would deal with some of the special projects. So it's good to have two people involved. The other thing I'll say on getting a business started is to try to be very, to move in some ways progressively, but also be very conservative. And like, don't take on any unnecessary overhead. I know a lot of people that maybe they get a business loan, so they'd set up an office or they'd set up a studio. And, you know, do you really need the studio? Do you really need the office? So I think I've read a lot of military history. It's a hobby of mine. And I always love General Patton's quote about, you know, it's a folly to fight a war from fixed defense. So if you don't have that overhead as a fixed defense, so you're building this stationary mess that's sucking the financial life out of you every month. And if you don't have a real, like a restaurant, you need that. Like, you got to have a kitchen, you got to have that.
Right.
Print shop, you might need it. But if you have a business that doesn't require you to have that, then I'd put a little bit of extra money into brochures or web or film, so you can have a presence that doesn't involve expensive rent and overhead or somebody sitting there taking phone calls. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I think is really important is to watch your finances, but don't figure out what cash flow is and figure out what profit is and figure out what a balance sheet is. And when you understand those three things, they kind of work together. So when we started out, one of the problems we had is we were like, oh, we're making money, so we can just open another location. We did this and that. But we weren't looking at our balance sheet. We owed a lot of people a lot of money, and it didn't show up on our month-to-month profit. And so, you know, it creeped up on us at one point or another. Then we learned what the balance sheet was all about kind of the hard way. So you want to try to watch those three things. I suggest, really suggest getting a good, strong accountant, and I suggest using QuickBooks as that's the program people use. and use it every day. Get your bills in. Don't wait till the end of the week to do any of your billing or anything. Everything should go in real time into QuickBooks. And that's super important, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you are. Like, that's a bad thing. And then the other thing is like the first person that gets paid is the IRS in the state government. If you don't have the money set aside to pay your taxes, you're not in business. You're not going to be a business.
Those are wise words.
Yeah, so you're in quicksand if you're doing that. So it's having a good CPA. We use Colonial Tax Service down in Newcastle, guys, brilliant. You get them on the phone. Banker's a good idea, but they're gonna, you don't want to borrow any money you don't need. You really want to stay out of that's a form of overhead, having too much debt. So you want to stay out of debt. You don't want to have a lot of, if you think you need a truck, but maybe you can just get something done to yours and run it for another year, do that when you're getting off the ground. And have a good accountant. Have a bank that works, but don't get too tied up in their thing, because you don't want to borrow things, particularly if you don't need it. And frankly, if you're a new business, they're probably not going to loan any money to you anyway. Mm-hmm. And then if they're having you put your house up and stuff, that's a crazy idea. Just don't do it. So those are really, really seminal and really important things.
It's very solid.
In getting out of the market, like if you have lateral people that are in a business that's similar to yours, but not quite the same, but they can give you some recommendations on clients, that's a good way to meet people. Going to things like this, it's good to go to stuff. It's good to look around, but it's also good just to like look at the kind of the business news, look at the paper a little bit. It's not a newspaper anymore, but figure out who's incorporating, figure out who the new businesses are, and figure out where you can get some project work. The nonprofit sector is an interesting place to look. New business is a place to look. Law firms use a lot of promotional work these days. They didn't used to. So there's classes of businesses that never used to advertise now that are. Doctors' offices, dentists. These are lawyers' offices. These are places that are lucrative, and they're interesting to look at. For our business, a lot of the printing kind of went with an online model for a while. Like a lot of the nonprofits and all stopped sending out newsletters. And then a lot of places started doing their educational materials online, but then they found out that people don't look at any of it. So we've had a lot of customers roll back into us with the print is a lot more powerful than it was, say, 5 or 6 years ago, because the joke that you're going to send somebody a PDF and they're going to open it and look at it, no one looks at it.
I've noticed that myself as someone who does a lot of digital marketing, also does a lot of handheld. I've always liked the handheld flyers. I've always liked the business cards. And I'll tell you, 5-6 years ago, when you hand someone a flyer, they're looking at you like, why are you killing trees to tell me about your show? Just, send me an invite on the medias or whatever. And really, just in the last year, when I hand someone something, and there were, I don't know if you saw these two guys come in earlier. They were maybe, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And I started to grab them a business card, and I said, it's 2023. Just follow me on Instagram. And they both said, actually, I'll take a card, and it's there's something special about the tangibility. You lose it in your drawer, and then you move, and you see it again, and then it sticks around. It actually, it's also a part of your.
It's also a signal that you have the wherewithal to do that. And it gives people, from an anthropological standpoint, like people don't want to get involved with you if you're not bona fide. I always love that movie.
Bona fide.
I love that movie, Brother, Where Art Thou? Where the little girl goes up to George Clooney and goes, "Mama's got a new beau and he's bona fide."
Hey, bona fide.
And like that's what you are when you hand somebody a brochure, or if you land at a trade show, and you don't need to have something real crazy, but if you have a little bit of a backdrop and you're standing at the thing, and you're handing people some stuff and you're talking to people, you have some samples of your work, on a screen, or you have it somewhere. It shows people that you have the wherewithal to do that. So part of what you're doing is showing them what your business is, but part of it's just showing them also that you're a serious concern that can produce a brochure, understands what a business card is, and maybe went to a thing and gave a presentation or has a backdrop and all that. So a lot of our customers, they're not going to a convention because all this work's going to fall out of it, or somebody's going to walk up to their booth and read off of it and understand what they are. Brochures should be very sparse, but they should show a little bit of what you are and ask a few questions, and then lead them, get enough information that people are going to want to ask some questions about you. So you're really trying to create interest. You're not trying to tell the whole story.
And it's very, very clear. You know, we could talk for hours
Yes,
about this. For the sake of the series, you know, I do want to keep these right around 20, 25.
Right.
But you are a wealth of information. For all of your printing design needs, definitely check out Aztec Printing. Before we go, is there anything you got coming up? Bands? I know you're the Seedlings, the dishes. I don't know if those are.
I'm going to be at Zolly's this Friday. But
Zolly's this Friday.
Restaurant, so
yeah, that's a great spot. Incredible food at Zolly's. Free commercial for Zolly's. They have, what was that? The brisket. Oh, delicious in their brunch. That's that Old Newcastle. If you haven't done it, that's a great spot. Zolly's. Awesome to have you, Mr. Ed Dwornik. Want to thank you again. Thanks again for Stitch House for having us out. That's it for this week's Business Time. Have a good one, y'all.
Yeah.
It's business.